Well, it's certainly an honor and a privilege to be in front of you all today. I first of all want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedules. We all appreciate how busy you are and attending the Smart2Move European Summit. So again, the ground reaction forces, again, just some basic stuff, a reactionary force, how an individual pushes on the ground. And again, the ground reaction forces, people make the impression that the ground's not a trampoline. Well, of course not. Where do the ground reaction forces come from? It comes from our own body. It's our muscular action. We do have some elastic energy that's added to the system when we have a stretch a muscle or stretch a muscular system before we contract it. And again, but our own body is what we use to create the ground reaction force, because we're creating internal forces that will utilize this interaction with the ground to influence body motion. And what do they do? Like, if we think just on the force standpoint, force is a push or pull on an object that can change its state of rest, uniform motion, slow us down, speed us up, direction, or even shape. But in golf specifically, force precedes motion. We need to apply force before we can see motion. Speed us up, slow us down, change our direction. And how do we change the ground reaction force? Obviously, muscular capacity, increasing some of these factors. Do they need more force training, strength training? They need power training, they need speed training, or change our movement pattern? What can we do to make that more efficient within the ground reaction forces? And things that James alluded to, things that Dr. Rose alluded to, things that Mike alluded to modify these things in the positive direction for the player. Now, I wanted to, show you guys some examples. This is like long-winded. We haven't had a lot of examples, but I wanted to show you. Padrig has been a friend of mine, and he's very kind. He's done some great stuff with, his YouTube channel and his instruction. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of tour pros, and I have a lot in my iPad that did not want me to show their kinetic data, their force plate data. But Padrig, I asked him, I said, Padrig, is it okay? We're doing a presentation. And he's given me carte blanche to show, he said, as long as it helps people, I don't care. You can show my data to anybody. And so again, you guys know who Padrig is. You know the 3 senior champions. This year, interesting, he won the US Senior Open and the 2025, the Senior Open as well. 43 professional wins, 3 majors on the regular tour, 6 Ryder Cup plus his captaincy, World Golf Hall of Fame. So obviously we all know who Padrig is, but I wanted to show you, let's pull up a capture from Padrig. So this was 2 years ago. Some of you guys may have worked with Padrig, but he's got a lot going on in his mind. So we chatted for about an hour before we started this. This was after his round at the Rogers Charity Classic, where I live in Calgary, Alberta. And Padrig wanted to work on things. This was after the round. And it was particularly disappointing because after the 3rd hole, he was leading the tournament, ended up finishing a tie for 7th. And it was very disappointing for him. And I'm gonna show you some things that might have contributed to him within this capture. And this was like a normal stock swing, but he was on the course for 5 hours. We took a little break, and then we worked for 3 hours straight after he played for 5 hours after having a disappointing round. So again, let's take a look at Padrig's stuff. Let's look at this swing. So this is, again, we're at the range. I use the Smart2Move 3D mobile plates, and I need to use the mobile plates because I don't have a specific location where I'm tethered to. So I'm at the range with the guys, I'm at like an indoor facility, I'm at a bay. So it obviously gives me the greatest opportunity to take these anywhere and gives me great information. And it gives me that measurable information. Let's take a look at Padrig. Let's take a look at his swing. Again, he's been working on that lead foot move, kind of relocating it. I would call that sort of a fake move where that's not a force-based move, that's just him moving that lead foot, right? So again, he's been working on this. his intention to see me, and most people that come to see me, is to get a little faster. Let's take a look here. So we're going to look at sequence. So this one was about 170 miles an hour ball speed. He can get it over 180, but in our conversation, where he wanted to get to was like Xander Schauffele ball speed, like 182, 183, not having to work to get there. So he was sort of resistant to do any physical evaluation. So I don't know, I'm sort of short-handed. Ideally, I would have liked to assess him with the level 1 screen and then a power screen. We really didn't have time. We were going to see what we can do within maybe some efficiency with the swing to get after a little more speed. So again, this one was 170 or so, but let's look at what Dr. Rose alluded to, sequence, right? So the bottom line, so again, that bottom line is our lateral. I have the top of the swing here, and that's impact. So we can see the lateral peaks first, then the vertical torque, or torque about the vertical axis, horizontal plane torque, and then vertical last. So he's got a nice sequence, right? Got no issue with that. Now let's look at timing a little bit, like Dr. Rose alluded to. Now the sequence is good, irrespective of the timing. So again, we want to see that lateral peak at about the top of the swing or slightly before the top, right? So let's take a look. I'm going to roll it back a bit. So we're going to go to his peak lateral. Top of the swing to me and Dr. Rose is where you see the center mass change direction of the club. So when it starts to go towards the target, that's what we classify as the top. So again, right about the top, he's peaking lateral, so his timing with that is good. Let's go to the vertical torque next. So again, that lead arm parallel. So again, we want that lateral peak, the timing of it, slightly before the top or around the top. That vertical torque peak, when we look at our PGA numbers, it's going to be somewhere between the top and shaft vertical downswing. At Smart2Move, we get a little more specific where we're going to say that lead arm 45 above, horizontal to horizontal. I would say when I'm looking at the tour guys, that's a fairly common position, that P5 position where the arm is parallel to the ground for the peak of the vertical torque. So I got no issue with that. Now let's look at vertical. So peak vertical is at P6, right? So, for him, what are you guys thinking? Is that late or is that okay? Yeah, I'm thinking a little late for him, right? I want to see somewhere between lead arm parallel and shaft vertical downswing. When we look at TPI, we're seeing shaft vertical downswing is where we see the peak of that vertical if we were to average all of our data, right? No one's average though, just remember that. Very seldom are people average, but again, if we averaged all of our data, we would see the peak of vertical from the best players in the world at shaft vertical downswing. Now, this is going to be very difficult, as Dr. Rose alluded to, when we're using the ground to create angular momentum, getting force to the club. If we're doing it too late, it has to come through the ground and get to the hands, get to the club. Now, this is probably the last time it can actually get there, and it's not going to get there that good. I'll look at at shaft vertical, what is it? So again, at shaft vertical, we'll look at magnitudes in a second here, but again, let's reverse this order. So at shaft vertical, I'd love to see him peaking his vertical here, but let's look at this number, 127. I don't love that number. That's a low number. Again, remember our tour, Dr. Rose alluded to 202%, right, of body weight. This is after Padrig has played. He's tired. He's got some knee issues as well, so keep that in mind. So again, 127, I'm not loving that. For sure, I think the lead knee. But he wears the braces underneath his, and a lot of times it's not, but I think he's wearing 2 braces now, actually, one on both knees. So does have a knee issue or potentially knee issues, right? So but I'm not privy to that information, right? So I'm a bit shorthanded. But again, I'm thinking, could that be part and parcel to this, maybe the low vertical, or what's his physical capacity, right? So again, I'm looking at shaft vertical. Let's look at magnitudes now. 146 at that P6. Again, I'd like to see that bigger, right? If I'm gonna get more speed out of him, there's only so much, I can do with this. Obviously, it doesn't tell the whole picture because when we're looking at everything, it doesn't necessarily, when we look at all the kinetic data, everything still has to get to the hand, get to the club through the hands and the wrists. So that's the conduit, right? Because that's our connection to the club. Very important, but again, I'm not loving that. Let's look at his vertical torque, 77 Newton meter scale to mass. Again, not bad. I would like to see that number a little bit higher. His lateral, again, he does some things similar to the long drive guys. That 11, as Dr. Rose alluded to, that combined lateral force, that push down in a way to create the reactionary force towards the target. Again, he's maxing at 11, 12. But what I'm really liking what he does, I'll show you on that lateral curve. If we go to the lateral and we start the club back, what I'm looking here initially is this pressure distribution in the backswing, and Mike alluded to this as well. So the lead foot is the blue and the trail is the red. What I'm looking for, what is the maximum value backswing? So this is like a proxy of how well he's loading into that trail side. He gets to 91, 92, 93. Sure. So he gets to 93 at P3, which is about, that's a good load into that trail side. So this would be a player that, obviously, a more center player is not going to hit that number, but he is more of a player that loads that trail side. As Mike would allude to, he's like a trail post guy. He loads into that trail side quite well at that 93. And, if we saw the long drive guys, they load into that trail side a minimum 85 to 100. But Padrig really loads into that really well. He does it at a quite a good time, P3 position, right? He maxes that out. So he's getting into that trail side early, which is good. Those of you who teach a lot of amateurs, and if you look at that pressure distribution, they keep that pressure rocking and rolling all the way to the top. So again, one of the things we notice with the best players in the world, the fastest players in the world, they get pressure into that trail side super quick. The long drive guys, they're at P2, maxing that trail side pressure. And again, one of the things you want to look at is that trail shin, that from the center of the knee to the center of the foot. Now, if that average person, if they get that, what we call negative shin angle, if the shin gets tilted away from the midline, it's going to be really hard for them to get back to center or, get that pressure forward so they can do all the great stuff on the lead foot, as Dr. Rose alluded to. But again, we want to see, ideally, a positive shin angle. I don't mind something, approaching vertical, but again, that positive shin angle, if the player's here, you could do this yourself. We're running a little late on time. Usually I get you out of your seat, but if we get that shin angle negative and we try to jump as far as we can to the left side, it's going to be slow. Now, if we get that shin perfectly straight, it's a little faster and more robust. But now if I have a positive shin angle where the shin is tilted towards the midline of the body, I can really be quick with that. So again, keep an eye on that shin angle. But again, he gets 93% of that trail side. And one of the other things I want to see is, when does he go positive with that lateral force? When does he start producing force, ground reaction force towards the target? So when does he start tipping the scale? Because he's producing negative to load that trail side, but he has to produce positive to stop it and arrest that motion, because he's also throwing the club back with the arms, hands, turning the torso, pelvis as well. So again, he goes positive at, look where the club is. Again, he's 12 inches off the ball, and he's already going, we're positive on the lateral. What you'll see with the average person, they're still going negative well after P3. Now let's look at, his torque. Again, his maximum, about 77 Newton meter scale to mass on our scale. I also like to look, when does he go positive on that? So in fact, he's turning away from the ball, but he's actually producing positive force. Why is that? Well, he's got to stop and arrest what he's created. This is all negative impulse, meaning he's produced a lot of force over a significant amount of time to help rotate his body away in the backswing. So he starts producing positive torque early at P3. So again, the average player, they keep that rocking and rolling. They're producing negative all the way to the top. So it's going to be very difficult for the average person with the laterals still going backwards, with the torque still being negative, to get things early and also get to the right kinetic sequence or the timing of that kinetic sequence to be ideal. Now let's look at the force. Again, when Padrig gets to the top, that 148 or 146 or so, like right, a little bit late though, right? So again, he's doing some nice stuff laterally, some reasonable stuff vertical torque-wise. But the other thing that Dr. Rose mentioned, let's take a look at his negative, remember that negative lateral. So that's the push down and towards the target to stabilize things and create all the good stuff out of that lead leg. Again, he's at minus 19 at this point. Usually what we would like to see is a ratio of somewhere about 1.4, 1.5. I like to look at the ratio of that negative to the combined positive, and I want to see that 1.4, 1.5. That gives the player the opportunity to utilize all the good stuff out of that lead foot. So he's 11, down here is minus 19, so he's almost 2 times, so not bad. He's able to, that ratio is good, but I'm not loving the vertical. So we worked a little bit. I'm going to show you what we did with Padrig. So worked with him on a little bit of timing of that lead foot vertical. And, that minus 19, I think, if he puts more into that lead foot, he'll probably get more out of the lead foot vertical to get more of that lead foot. So, or out of the lateral. So we worked for a little bit of time, and okay, let's look at this one. So again, let's look at the sequence. So if we go to the peak, lateral peaks first. So again, it's right at the top like we saw. Now remember, 77 was his top number before. Now we got more vertical torque out of this one, 92 now, so a significant improvement in the vertical torque. And again, is it earlier or later? Remember, he was at P5 before, right? When he peaked his vertical torque, so this is a little bit earlier. And now let's look at his vertical. So again, now 178, remember 145 before to 178, that's a significant improvement. And again, now he's almost at shaft vertical downswing, so it's earlier than before. So again, we worked a little bit on magnitude, but more so on the timing of it. And then we got a pretty good bump in the vertical. We got the vertical earlier, we got the vertical torque earlier, horizontal plane torque, and we had some good positives. So we went from 170 to 180. So that's not bad. So 10 mile an hour with a tour player. And again, I'm going to show you one thing that's pretty cool. I'll show you on this capture. If we go to, so this one is our 3D animation, or it's a face on. And this one is, the green dot is an estimate of his center of mass. So from this one, we can see, and that circular yellow is his frontal plane torque. It's the magnitude. When it gets big, it's a larger number. In the future, we'll have other metrics involved with this, specifically attach an actual force number or a torque number to this. But if we look at Padrig, and again, we can see, he starts positive right about just a little bit on the downswing, and it grows. And again, remember Dr. Rose said we would see that frontal plane peak just before the horizontal or the vertical torque, and just by estimating, they're about the same, which is good. So the yellow force vector is the combination of the lead foot and the trail foot, and when this is going through the center of mass, the body is stabilized, or it's a proxy of stabilization. So we can see with his capture, ideally, remember he peaked vertical at about this lead arm 45, and we could see that global vector going right through his center of mass. And again, this is this idea of when that happens, the body is stabilized, but it also stabilizes the delivery of the club. And I'll show you, remember, so this is when I worked with him after, and he was hitting it immensely better than when he hit it on the course. I followed him all day on the course for 5 hours, and I'll show you, maybe it was a factor of him getting tired, potentially maybe an injury, or the knee. I don't know. I really haven't had the time to sit down with him and actually ask him about it. But this is like right after the round, right? And let's look at the swing. So we see that the frontal plane, it's growing, it's decreasing, but we can still see it's positive, right? And we can still see it's in front of the center of mass, or the estimate of where the center of mass is. So again, remember I said it's this idea of that when that lines up, especially just after his peak vertical, that's an idea of giving us some idea or insight into that stabilization of the body and also delivery of the club. So again, him with us working a little bit more, getting out of that lead foot, and he hit it much better. I'm thinking, this could be a strategy, if things are going or trending in a specific direction, maybe a strategy for him to be able to stabilize a little bit better in going down the road. So just a bit of stuff I do with the tour guys. Obviously that's just a really brief, there's a whole bunch of other factors I look at, but again, we'll go into some of the drills to influence these things with Dr. Rose and I over here, and we all have the breakouts this afternoon. So, but again, I thank you all for being a part of the Smart2Move European Summit, and I look forward to seeing you this afternoon and tomorrow. Thank you.